Welcome everyone. Today I'm here with my good old buddy Mr. Halo, and we're going to talk about a feature that I think gets kind of forgotten about sometimes when we talk about the different Halo games and what makes them good and what makes them bad, and that is the different maps from all the games.
Hello, this is Bring Halo Back. Oh, hi.
Thank you for blasting out my eardrums.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so why don't we kick it off? So to you, what makes a good Halo map, or just what makes a good multiplayer map in general?
Well, to be honest, it's hard for me to put into words exactly what makes a good map. Like if you put a handful of maps in front of me, I could tell you, which ones I think are good, which I think are bad, and why. But just off the top, I think one thing that makes a map good is something that works with a multitude of game types. Something that's good for Team Slayer, Free for All, Capture the Flag, things like that. And the map also has to be balanced for both teams. Like whether the map is symmetrical or asymmetrical, like it needs to be. It can't be one-sided. It has to be fair, depending on no matter what team you're on, red or blue.
Yeah, I would agree, unless you're playing some of those one-sided game modes, but then the map usually suffers in other areas.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would kind of say, like, for me, and I think we'll dive into this deeper, but I think one thing that the older Halo games did better, specifically like Halo CE through 3, is they had a wide variety of different styles of maps. You had symmetrical maps, you had asymmetrical maps, and you had maps that were built around core features that were unique at the time. Like you have Zanzibar that's built around a giant moving ring. How many other games have a map like that? Or you have Guardian, which isn't the most unique map in the world, but it's built up on a bunch of trees. It's a platform, and it's a lot different than just playing something like Lockout, which is another good map. Or you have like Narrows, which is built like the prime, not the middle of the map, obviously, that's a big bridge, but a main feature of the map is that you can use a man cannon and get from one side of the map to the other side in literally like 2 seconds or however long it takes to man cannon. And I think one thing that Halo 4 and 5 have struggled with is having maps that have those unique things that are good maps so that you actually like remember them. There's so many Halo 4 and 5 maps that all just blend together in my mind. And I don't know if you kind of feel differently.
Well, no, yeah, the maps for Halo 1 through 3, they were definitely more unique. There was a bigger variety. But I think that has I don't know how true this is, but I just feel like developers, I feel like they put more time into developing multiplayer maps back in the day. Like I think it was Chris Carney or Max Hoberman who worked on the maps for Halo 2 and Halo 3. And when I hear them like discuss a certain map and they'll walk you through their thoughts as they developed it, and it just seems like they put a lot more thought into it, a lot more time. And nowadays I just feel like developers, they just come up with a bunch of maps, throw them together and call it a day.
Yeah, what part of me kind of wonders too if it's the case of people have been making multiplayer maps now for so many years that it's hard to constantly reinvent the wheel. Like when
I kind of think that's part of the problem. I think developers are trying to reinvent the wheel, and I don't necessarily think you have to.
Yeah, I can't say I can think of a single Halo 5 map that I would say tried to reinvent the wheel. I think one of Halo 5's biggest issues with the map pool in that game is that every map was, other than Warzone, that's kind of its own thing, but every one of the arena maps I feel like was too focused on being an esports game. Like, don't get me wrong, your maps need to be balanced, but when every single map needs to be this hyper competitive map, it kind of ruins the fun of the maps. And then, in turn, hurts the esport because no one wants to play a bunch of dull maps just because they're balanced. If the only thing we cared about was playing a balanced map, every single map would be like a 2-base map with a structure in the middle and like lanes on each side. They'd all be the same map if the prime goal was to have an esports game, right?
Oh yeah, I agree for sure. I mean, just look at Halo 1 through 3. Bungie, they weren't designing their maps with esports in mind, and the classic Halo games have some of the most memorable maps in the series.
For sure. And I think one thing that you can really point to there with that is there are some horrifically balanced Halo CE through Halo 3 maps, but that kind of gives them the charm, and that's why the competitive communities in those games really watered down the map pool to a very small amount of the maps that were actually in the game. That's why you played like the same 5 or 6 maps in the MLG circuit and whatnot. But for the casual who's just playing matchmaking or playing with their buddies, playing social, it's nice to have like 10 to 15 maps that all try and do different things rather than 10 to 15 maps that are all trying to be this competitive esports map.
Yeah, and another thing, just think like Halo 5 it didn't even have any BTB maps. They were all Forge maps. Are they still just Forge maps? Have they ever given us a dev-made BTB map?
They never made a dev-made BTB map. It's all
that's insanity to me. That is insane. We haven't got an actual BTB map for Halo 5. That's unbelievable. Like Forge in Halo 5 is great, but I mean, it can't compete with a developer-made map.
No, for sure, I agree. And there are forgers out there that have made amazing maps, and it's super cool to see what they can make. But at the end of the day, and maybe Infinite changes this, right? But in Halo 5 or any of the previous Halos, at the end of the day, the developer-made maps needed to be the maps that carried the map pool. And actually, I think one problem that Halo 5 had, and you mentioned it, is it relied way too heavily on the Forge maps. Like BTB was all Forge maps, which I don't even know how you make that decision. I would assume it was a time crunch thing, and they just thought that no one cared about BTB or something, but that dumbfounds me, because BTB, especially coming from Halo 4, BTB was like the only game mode that people said like, oh, this was actually good in this game. And to then take that into your next game and be like, yeah, so we pretty much got rid of BTB. Here's some Forge maps for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's some diehards for Halo BTB. I mean, when I'm playing social on MCC, most of the time that's what I want to play. If I'm searching solo, I'll be in the BTB playlist. And I just wanted to go back real quick to when I said talked about like how I think a lot of developers trying to reinvent the wheel nowadays when it comes to multiplayer maps. You're right, that really isn't the case with Halo. I was just kind of thinking, I had Call of Duty in my head. Like, you know how with Modern Warfare 2019?
Oh, yeah.
Like how they were trying to get away from that 3-lane design.
Yeah.
And, well, we all saw how that worked out. Like, the maps are just awful in Modern Warfare. There's just too many angles that you can be shot from. So that's what I had in my head when I was saying that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Modern Warfare 2019. I remember seeing that meme picture where I don't remember which map it was, but it was just a screenshot, and someone had circled every single angle you would have to check if you wanted to cross the street. It was so ridiculous.
Yeah, when it comes to like these, memorable maps, it goes beyond just Halo. Like even with like Call of Duty, like COD 4, it seemed like every map was a banger. And now you look at the most recent COD, Cold War, and they're all just meh. Like, I don't think anyone likes the maps in that game. And there's not many of them.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. In Halo Infinite, or I'll back up a little bit. So, like, in Halo 5, I think most people would point to, like, Coliseum and Truth probably being, like, some of the strongest maps from that game. And if you go back to Halo 4... I think a lot of people would maybe point to Haven or the Halo 3 remakes like Pit and Valhalla. Or I know a lot of people like Exile, but the more I play Halo 4 lately, I'm actually not sure why so many people like that map. I used to like look at it and think it was cool, but I've been playing it a lot lately in that Squad Battles playlist, and I don't think it's a very good map. Maybe I'm like getting a bad taste of it because I'm trying to play ranked Halo 4, which is a whole different ball game, but
I just thought it was average.
Yeah. So like in Halo Infinite, do you think that for the multiplayer to be really good, do we need, let's say we get a map pool at launch that's like 10 to 15 maps, unless we're Call of Duty and we get like 4. But let's say we get a map pool that's like 10 to 15 maps. How many of those maps do you think need to be like actually like new unique maps? And then out of those new unique maps, how many of them do you think actually need to be like really, really solid maps for us to have a strong map pool?
Well, first I want to say that like for me, multiplayer maps have a huge influence on whether or not like I'm going to enjoy a game. Like I love Halo 3, but if it only consisted of crappy maps, I probably wouldn't have played that nearly as much as I did.
Yeah, no, I would agree there for sure. And one thing to point out when we talk about the classic Halo games having good map pools, there are some absolute stinkers in there for sure
Oh,
too.
absolutely.
But it's the fact that I think what Halo 2 and Halo 3 specifically do really well is they have a handful maybe of really like top tier solid maps, but it's like it's that middle ground of just really like solid good, like it really fills out the map pool. Whereas I think the problem with Halo 4 and Halo 5 is you have a couple maps that are good in the eyes of the community, and then you just have a bunch of like subpar maps. You have a bunch of maps that people don't even want to play.
Yeah, and before I lose this thought, I just wanted to make a point. Notice how, like, in Halo 2 and especially Halo 3, how with a lot of the maps, the vanilla map, like they didn't have to make many changes to that map for the hardcore settings, right? So like Narrows, you still got your 2 snipes and your rockets in the same place. The pit, a lot of the weapons are in the same place, and I think that's interesting because with some of Halo 5's maps, you had to make a ton of changes to weapon placement and power-ups and things like that.
Yeah, Halo 5's maps and the weapon placement,
and especially 4. I mean, holy crap!
Yeah, well, 4 was built with that. That's just a different. Those maps were built around totally different mechanics than they tried to play competitively, and so I don't know. I mean, same with Reach, right? Reach is a totally different ballgame too.
True.
Yeah, I think, well, one thing too with 5 that I think gets a little forgotten about there is since 5 is more of a modern game than something like Halo 3, there's so many more iterations and updates on those maps to move weapons around and move power-ups like you were saying. And I think a lot of those changes are just driven by matchmaking too, not necessarily just like the HCS.
Yeah.
So what's kind of your opinion on, like, do you think Halo Infinite should remake a bunch of maps, or do you think it should focus on new and unique maps and maybe have a couple of the classics?
Well, I mean, remakes are cool, but I mean, ideally, I would want new good maps for the game. I don't want remakes to be looked at as the best maps in that game. Like in Halo Reach, like one of the best maps was Sanctuary. And that's just a remade map from Halo 2.
Yeah, it was just a Forge remake too. That was the funniest part.
And it was all gray, and
yeah.
Oh my god. But no, yeah, I mostly want new maps for Halo Infinite, and a remake or two wouldn't hurt, or maybe if they remade a game later or remade a map later on, threw it in a DLC or something, that'd be nice. But yeah, I'd say overall I want new maps, new good maps, and BTB maps. Asymmetrical, symmetrical, some that work good with, for esports, some that are good for social. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's something they need to focus on too, is we need to get a wide variety of different maps, right? Like maps that are good for like 4v4, capture the flag, Slayer, like the standard arena modes, but we also need fun maps for BTB and just maps that are like fun in different ways too. Like you want a couple of symmetrical maps that are the same on both sides, and you want a couple like wacky asymmetrical maps too, just so that everything kind of stays fresh when everything's the same style of map. Because like when I look back to Halo 5, they did mix up like asymmetrical and symmetrical, but the maps are just also samey because they're all 4v4 arena maps. Like that is all those maps were built to do, and most of them do it okay, but when every map's goal is to do the same exact purpose, you just end up with a mush of maps that none of them really stand out.
Exactly. And haven't you noticed how they kind of phased out vehicles for 4v4, starting with Reach? Like, in Halo 3, you had vehicles in certain maps, like for 4v4 maps, like High Ground, what are some other maps? Orbital, things like that. There were 4v4 team Orbital as of what are Ghost Town. There was maps here and there.
No, a bunch of them have
Isolation. Yeah. Standoff. There were 4 Snowbound, Sandbox. There was a lot of 4v4 Team Slayer maps that had vehicles on that, and I don't have a problem with that. But they phased that out in
Yeah.
Halo Reach and Halo 4 and Halo 5. Like, yeah, that's not ultra competitive, but it's fun for something like Team Slayer or Social Slayer. And I think we need a, like you said, a lot of the Halo 5 maps are the 4v4 arena style, no vehicles, and yeah.
I think that is a really good point. Is something as simple as that is having a couple maps that are 4v4 maps, but they have a ghost on them, or they have a couple mongooses, and maybe they're a smidge bigger, or like maybe they have a warthog on them or something like that. That definitely does it, because it completely changes up how those maps play. When you play Standoff in Team Slayer, that plays 100% different than when you play Narrows, because you have to control the warthogs if you're playing like ranked. If you're playing social, you kind of just run around.
Yeah,
but
it gives that map like an identity.
Yeah, and although in Standoff's case it is a terrible identity.
Well, yeah, I mean standoff's awful, but
No, for sure. I totally get what you're saying there. I think that's a really good point, and I think too when I look back at Halo 3, I feel like the power weapons on different maps too kind of varied depending on the map. You had, Guardian and Narrows that had a sniper on them, and Narrows had a rocket launcher. But then you had something like High Ground that has sniper Spartan laser. That stuff like that I feel like has gone away from it too. It seems like when I look back at Halo 5, I feel like every map, maybe not every single map, but a bunch of the maps had sniper rifles, a bunch of them had railguns, and a bunch of them had rocket launchers. And that was like the power, and the plasma caster or whatever, but those were like the power weapons.
Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of sums it up for me. Do you have anything else?
I think that's pretty much it. That's my opinions on the map pool for Halo.
All right. Oh, cool. I think that was a good discussion. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find your content?
No.
All right. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone.